Welcome to episode 47 of Real Health Radio. You can find the links talked about as part of this episode at the show notes, which are at www.7, so seven-health.com/47.
Welcome to Real Health Radio. Health advice that's more than just about how you look. And here's your host, Chris Sandel.
Hey guys, welcome to another installment of Real Health Radio. This should be a solo episode, but I'm actually doing something a little different today. As part of the show, what I'm going to be doing is sharing with you 2 interviews I've done with clients of mine. One of them I've just finished working with. The other is a longer term client that I'm still continuing to work with. And the reason for doing this podcast is twofold. So the first reason is because it was a request from a regular listener. They emailed me and said that they would love to hear me interview some of my clients to hear about their experiences. So they enjoyed the podcast with other guests, but it would be nice to hear from my clients and what happened with them. And this was a great idea. It had been something I'd thought about doing, so that's why I've put together this show. I am always open to topic suggestions. So if there are things that you would like me to talk about as part of the show, you can drop me an email at info@7-health.com. So that's SEVEN-health.com, and I will then get back to you. The second reason for doing this show is because I've just opened my practice again to new clients. So I take on clients twice a year, once around the January, February time, and then around the midpoint of the year, which is where we are now. And this will be the last time that I take on new people in 2016. So the way I work with clients is I work for a period of 5 months where we have a consult for an hour every 2 weeks. And this is all done via Skype or FaceTime. I have clients all over the world. And so even if you're not based in the UK, this isn't a problem. Like more than 50% of the people I work with are in the US or Canada or Australia or Germany or other places around like Europe and the rest of the world. So have a listen to the show today, and if working with you appeals to me, then what I like to do is start off by having a free initial chat with someone, because this allows me to find out about your background, what's going on, and what you're wanting to get out of us working together, and it gives me the opportunity to explain how I work with clients and how the process works, and basically this conversation lets us see if we are the right fit for one another. Because I only want to work with people I truly believe that I can help, and people who are on the same page as me. And so this chat allows us to work out if that's the case. So if you are interested in finding out more, you can head over to 7-health.com/help. And there will be then more details there. You can have a read through the page, and at the bottom of the page, there is a link to apply for the free initial chat. And if you do that, I'll get back to you within 48 hours, normally much quicker than that, and we can then arrange a time that suits both of us. So if you're struggling with health or nutrition, body image, hormones, food issues, or like the multitude of other things that I've talked about on different podcast shows, then go to 7-health.com/help and get in contact. So with that out of the way, let's get on with the show. The first interview is with Martha. So Martha is a client I've just finished working with. She got in contact with me late last year and was one of the first people to sign up when I then opened my practice again to new clients at the start of the year. So without further ado, here's my interview with Martha. So Martha, thank you so much for coming on the show with me today and for sitting down and doing this interview with me.
No worries.
So to start with, why don't you describe a little about your background and what was your reason for getting in contact with me?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so for years, I mean, I don't know when it all started, but I've had lots of physiological issues with food, definitely like through university and when I started working as well, just to do with like bloating and some IBS, and having reactions to different foods, but not being able to identify what was causing what. I used to get a lot of like bad nausea as well. And so I've always wanted to work on that and get to the bottom of what was causing that. But alongside it, I've over time, I think, developed more and more of a kind of issue around body image and what to eat, and like been overloaded with information about different diets and exercise plans and all that kind of thing. And I think it made me build up quite a significant anxiety around food and eating and all the stuff that's associated with that I think is a problem for lots of women. And a couple of years ago, I moved jobs and worked and now work in the fitness industry, which is an industry that I love and I'm very passionate about, but obviously comes with a kind of sometimes more intense version of some of those things, because you're constantly exposed to the latest food plans and diets and exercise regimes and all that kind of thing. So I think it maybe strengthened my focus on that side of food more than I wanted it to. So a combination of those two together made me think about, I really wanted to get to a point where instead of trying to fix it by like going on the latest plan or, you know, losing weight, that I actually wanted to get to a point where that wasn't the end goal, and that actually I was more just happy with the way that I felt physiologically, but also emotionally about my body and about the way I looked as well.
So with all of that going on, I mean, was there any hesitancy in contacting me? Did it feel like a big decision? Was this something you'd worked on before with anyone?
It definitely felt like a big decision. I mean, it was always linked with, like, times when it was worse would be linked with other times in my life when I was stressed about something else. And so often, so it was very like phasal, and I would have a hard time with it and think that, you know, it was something that I wanted to look into more. And often the physical side would match the emotional side. So I'd have particular issues with like digestion or whatever, when I was also feeling less good about myself and my own body image, because I think the stress of that kind of often translated into my body not responding to food as well either. But yeah, so it would go through a bad patch, and then I would move through it because other things in my life would change, and you know, it would just be something that I would like get more confidence or feel better about myself, and then end up thinking that it wasn't worth investing too much time in resolving it. And I guess the last kind of wave of that I again got to a point where it wasn't particularly on my mind anymore, but I felt like it had happened enough times that I knew it was going to come back again, and that I wanted to work on it, especially at a time when I was feeling actually a little bit more positive, because I'd be able to come at it with a bit more energy and a bit more like resolve to change it. So it was a really big decision. I think initially I was more interested in the, you know, how can I sort out my like stomach issues side of things. And as the process went on, it became more equally distributed across both things, which I'm really glad about, because as I said, the more I think about the times when the body image stuff has been bad, I think it's had a really direct impact on my physical relationship with food as well. So I think the two, for me anyway, are pretty intrinsically linked.
Yeah. And so do you want to explain a little bit about the process? I mean, I can explain what I do with clients, but I'd like to hear it from your perspective, and what were some of the things that we dealt with or went through, exercise or anything along those lines.
Yeah, for sure. So I did a lot of like pre-work in terms of both sides of it. So I did a lot of gave you lots of information about the symptoms that I were the symptoms that I had physically, as well as doing like recording of temperatures and my pulse and like things that I didn't think of as anything to do with nutrition to begin with, but like overall sort of metabolic health stuff. And then also, and set some like pretty clear objectives on that side. So like things that I knew that I really wanted to focus on and improve. So like energy levels, for example, or like just things related to my digestive health. And then we did a lot on the other side as well. So writing some pretty honest stuff about how I did feel about myself, and things that made it worse or triggered it, and things that didn't, and where I wanted to get to on that side of things as well. So for me, I just wanted to get to a point where I didn't feel the stress around food, but particularly I didn't want to feel any guilt about it. Wanted to be able to like eat when and what I wanted without beating myself up about things. If I felt, there were definitely times where I would get overly concerned if I felt like I'd made a bad food choice or eaten like a bad food in inverted commas, whereas I wanted to get to a point where I just didn't have the stress around it, because overall I know that I live a pretty healthy lifestyle, so there really isn't any need for me to be overly concerned about that sort of thing.
Okay, cool. And so with the body image stuff, like, where are you at now? Like, what changes what changes have you noticed? And like, don't feel like you have to say like everything's amazing. Like, I know this stuff is a process, so like just talk about like what you were working on and like where you're at now.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the fact that I'm even having this conversation with you is pretty massive, because I would never have talked about it. It wasn't something that I was pretty ashamed, I guess, that this was something that I was concerned about. I've always like come across as pretty confident, and generally speaking I am, but I felt like this was like a weakness, and that this isn't something that I should be concerned about, and just the process of talking to you meant that I then got much more confident about speaking to other people about it, and now don't really feel embarrassed about it at all, particularly because the more people I spoke to, especially other women of my age, but like fairly universally, everyone had either similar or pretty similar issues themselves. And I realized how much of a kind of an epidemic it is, in that there is just so many, I'm sure there are men who do this as well, but I obviously can't speak as knowledgeably about that. But women of my generation who spend crazy amounts of time beating themselves up about the way that they look, and then not feeling like they can even admit it, because it's not something that you're supposed to care about, or it's supposed to be something that comes easily to you, or if it is something you beat yourself up about, then you should just do something about it, like that sort of thing. So I think the fact that I'm able to have this conversation with you now speaks volumes. And in terms of, we obviously did a lot of we did some practical things, like I follow different people on Instagram now to make sure that I get like a really good cross range of images coming at me, rather than stuff that made me feel maybe not so good about myself. And similarly, we did quite a lot of self-care stuff, and I did a bit of journaling, and more than anything, just actually took time to ask why I did feel the way that I felt. So it had always been a negative feeling that I didn't want to entertain at all. But, sometimes you have to ask yourself the slightly difficult questions as to why you feel a certain way. And most of it isn't really related to food at all. It's about like I'm kind of a perfectionist, and this was just another thing that I needed to get exactly right. And ultimately you can't. So it's good to realize that. And I think, so like you said, it's certainly not like I'm now 100% confident 100% of the time. And I don't think anyone is ever like that. And everyone, if it's not body image, there's something else that people have insecurities about. But I'm just able to appreciate that it's just a feeling, that it's not really based on anything rational. It doesn't change my like worthiness as a person in any way. And that also, when I do go through phases where it's worse, I'm able to get over them much, much quicker. It'll be like a matter of days as opposed to a matter of weeks or months where I would go through phases of that sort of feeling.
Okay. And look, one of the things I would say that you alluded to is like just opening up to people. And pretty much every time I'd have a consult with you, you're like, I told this other person, I had this really good conversation with this person. And I think that's a really big component of it, because I think you said previously, like that shame, it starts to erode when you're then talking about it and it's not like isolated. And then the other thing you'd mention around that is like you look at someone else's body and say, oh wow, I wish I had their body, and then you have a conversation with them and they're like, I'm so envious of your body, and like no one's happy with what they've got. It's always like the grass is always greener.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think just opening up and chatting with people and the right people, like it's not like you go in and tell like every coworker or whatever about the situation, but with the right people, it can be just quite a healing process just from going through that chat.
Yeah, definitely. And I talked to my mum quite a lot about it as well, and she told me about similar things that she'd had when she was sort of like, 20 to 30 or whatever. And again, that, we're very close and we talk about everything, but we never had that conversation. And I imagine because she was probably equally, either embarrassed about it or like me, thought that it was just something that, you just have to get on with or whatever. So I think you just by talking about it with people, you get a sense of where it might have come from for you as well. It helps you understand it a bit more.
And so then from the food perspective side of things, like how has your eating changed? How's your thoughts about eating changed? And also like looking at things from a symptoms perspective, because I know you mentioned like digestion was a real reason for getting in contact. So just a bit about that stuff. Yeah,
well, we sort of built up the food logging, and that I found that pretty daunting to begin with, because as I wasn't always super relaxed around food, it was like an extra thing to have to constantly be aware of what I was eating and logging it and all that kind of thing. But actually that's been a really positive process in the end, because I think you should be comfortable and confident with what you're eating and be aware of it. And the main thing was just paying more attention to it. So I would notice when I got a headache and whether I'd had like enough sleep the night before, and if I'd eaten breakfast at the same time that morning. You just become so much more aware of the things that we do totally subconsciously most of the time, and it helps you get to the bottom of why things are the way they are. And so for me, I thought a lot of things that I thought, oh, well, it's a problem with my digestion and therefore it must be to do with something that I've eaten today or yesterday. The more I was looking at patterns and monitoring like my behaviors and habits every day, I became more aware that like, actually, no, it's much more to do with when I've had a really bad night's sleep, or when I've been super stressed at work, or like I suddenly realized how much more it was all connected, and that it's only when you start really paying attention that you're able to make more sort of informed decisions about that stuff, rather than just guessing or like, oh, so-and-so told me that it's to do with this and therefore that must be what it is. Which is the other thing that I've picked up on, is that we are just everyone is so different. What works for someone doesn't work for someone else. And so the only way you're ever really going to get to the bottom of it is by just paying lots of attention to what you are doing and how it makes you feel.
Yeah. And I would just add with this, I don't do food logs with every client, or if I do, I judge the level of detail that we need to be going in with that stuff. Is it about me just making sure they're eating enough as part of their recovery? It is really dependent on the person. Like, you were in a position where you could start to look at this stuff and it wasn't going to be like anxiety inducing. And we were wanting to look at what was going on from a digestive perspective and things that were going on physiologically. And so for other clients, I won't necessarily start there if that's not appropriate for them. So I just want people to understand that it was a very specific thing that I chose to do because I knew where you were at.
Yeah, and for me, it was really helpful, because I think, as I said, I just would often just make very quick assumptions about what what would lead to me feeling a certain way, and it was seeing it in like black and white in front of me that made me realize, actually, like, I've eaten similar stuff all week. It definitely can't be that's caused this. And actually it must have been because I had and also it really helps talking that stuff through with someone, because you're never going to take the time to do it if it's just on your own. Whereas when we would catch up, there'd be lots of times when I've even put all the information down, and you'd say like, oh, well, the only times that you mentioned that were when this had happened the day before. And I was like, oh yeah, that is true. But it had been right there in front of me, and I'd just not been able to see it. So I think for me, it was really useful.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, the only food logs you ever look at are your own. I look at this for lots of people that I've been doing this for numbers of years, and so there's just things that I will start to pick up much easier than someone who is like a rank beginner at doing it. Yeah. And so if you were to compare like yourself like before we started this process and where you are now, like what are the big things that come to mind?
So most significantly for me, I just feel so much calmer about food and eating and all the stuff that comes with it. So I've just become so much more aware that like there's really no point in setting like strict rules for yourself or beating yourself up when you break rules like that ultimately, like, it's such an old thing to say, but it is all just about moderation, and that as long as you're doing things consciously rather than just eating food that you're not thinking about or whatever, that you're able to like look back and figure out why you might feel a certain way after having eaten a certain thing or not slept much the night before, that you can only judge it by what you feel, and there's no point in following like I used to get like a lot more sort of swept in by different diets that came out or different like fads that came forward, and so I think it's been quite like freeing to understand that actually you just have to go with your instincts and how your body feels, and if you're hungry at a certain time of the day, like just eat what makes you feel good at that time rather than getting caught up about whether like what does that mean that I can still have a big dinner, or like how will that affect the next meal that I have, and do I have to take that into account? It just, all you can do is know where your body's at and try and like act accordingly.
Yeah. So the final thing I just want to ask is like, if there is someone who is like listening to this and they're thinking about like dealing with some of the issues, whether that be physiological issues, whether that be body image issues, like what would you say to that person? And like, I'm no way in asking for you to give me like gushing praise and say like work with Chris. I just mean that like, if it could be for them to work with some other practitioner or anything like that, would there be some advice that you would give that person to take the next step?
Well, I think just talking to people generally. So for me, working with you has made such a huge difference, and I have definitely, it's been like a really clear process. I've always felt really supported the whole time, and it's definitely been a lot more of a struggle than I was anticipating for myself, but it's been massively worth it and rewarding, and I think generally for anyone who's thinking about starting to embark on any process like this, is just to talk to as many different people as possible. Like, we had a catch up before we started working together, and which I think was really important, because you have a specific way of working, and you want to make sure that the person who works with you gets the best out of it as well. And yeah. I talked to other people who were like very well respected and who friends of mine had really good experiences with, but I just knew that they weren't the right fit for me. So I would, I think talk to as many people as you can to find out. It's such a personal experience, and there'll be different things that work for you, whether it's the personality or the process or a bit of both. And it's just important that you get a really good handle on what works for you, and the person that you work with, you guys have a good connection, and you want to achieve the same things.
Cool. Well, look, thank you so much for agreeing to do this and for being really honest about your situation and the changes you made. I really appreciate it. And I know that people listening are also going to be getting some benefit from it. So thank you.
Thank you.
So this is then the second interview, and it is with a current client called Jenna. And I started working with Jenna at the end of August time last year. And while for all clients, they'll sign up initially for 5 months, sometimes I will continue working with them after this point. And this is much more common if someone's coming to me with disordered eating and that this is a fairly severe situation, or it just takes them a little longer with implementing changes and to get over this stuff. And really there isn't any rush, and I don't want someone to feel overwhelmed that they have to do it in a very short space of time. So I want to work with someone at a pace that is right for them, and if we need to then continue working for longer, then I'm okay with that. And with Jenna, she's someone who I am continuing to work with for now, just to keep working on things that she's still struggling with. So here is my interview with Jenna. So Jenna, thank you so much for agreeing to chat with me.
Yeah, you're welcome, Chris. Happy to be here.
Cool. So look, to start with, why don't you explain a little about your background, what was going on, and why you first got in contact to work with me?
Yeah, sure. I had heard your podcast, and actually it wasn't your podcast. You were on another podcast that I heard you initially and then started reading up on you. And I was diagnosed with hypothalamic amenorrhea and basically a missing period, and before that a very irregular period, which brought upon a lot of other symptoms, infections, stomach aches, bloating, heartburn, all the kind of physical stuff. And then on top of that, all the emotional stuff, lack of emotions and problems with relationships and closing off and issues around food and over-exercising and kind of a whole slew of problems that spiraled out of control.
Sure. And how long had that been going on?
Well, I'd never had a normal regular cycle ever since I was going through quote unquote puberty. Yep. So it's always been an issue, but it kind of escalated at any given time. There were certain times it got worse and other times I thought I had more control over it, which ended up being more of the cause of the problem, was that trying to control it and fix it. So most of my adult life and young womanhood, I would say.
And then the problems around like your relationship with food and the overexercising, when did that start?
It got the worst in college, and then it definitely spiraled out of control at big changes in life, right before a big move or a job change or high stress with work. That's when things seemed to get the worst. But as we know, stress is always constant in life, so it was always there looming and always an issue. It would just get out of control more often than not.
Okay. And so when you contacted me to start working together, did it feel like a big decision? Had you worked with someone before?
Yeah, I always tried to fix it myself, and that was a lot of the problem for years and years and years. I kept thinking, I can fix myself, this isn't a problem, and I kept telling myself it wasn't a problem and that it was just me being dramatic and that I was something that I could fix myself by reading and experimenting. And so I was very reluctant to even talk to anyone. And I finally did talk to somebody before I got in contact with you, and had one-on-one meeting in person, and did not have a good experience. It was I don't know that it was the one-on-one or it was the type of person or anything, but I just don't think that I was connecting well with the situation in general. I think just scheduling being in front of somebody and sitting in a room with somebody with a closed door, the whole situation seemed very intimidating, especially to me who didn't want to be there anyway. I really just wanted to fix it myself. I just wanted them to tell me what I need to fix and get out of there.
Yeah.
So the idea of working with somebody over Skype and talking in a schedule that worked better for me and my crazy schedule with work and life and everything seemed to be a better fit. And so that's how I kind of decided to take the pull.
Okay. And so why don't you, from your perspective, just explain the process that we went through. Like, I can obviously do this. I know what I'm doing when I'm working with a client, but it's always good to hear the other side of that. So some of the things that we went through, or some of the things we dealt with, like, yeah, from your perspective.
Sure. I think in the beginning, it was really important for me to have the initial, free chat with you before we even started working together, because that kind of just sealed the deal for me to make sure that you were the right person for me to work with in general. Because I think that having that initial, I didn't have that with the last person I worked with, to really think, okay, can I work with this guy? Can I talk to him? Am I going to open up to him? So that was really important. And I also think when you told me that we were only had a minimum of 10 weeks together, I think that is, looking back now, how important that is, because during the first
10
session,
sessions instead of 10 weeks.
Yeah. Yes. 10 sessions instead of 10 weeks. I also think that was important, because I think, say we had 10 sessions that were over the course of 2 weeks, I don't think I would have ever gotten to where I am now, because of that length of time that I took to do the things that we discussed in the talk. So kind of in the beginning, I feel we needed that time to get to know each other and for me to get comfortable, because I was uncomfortable with letting somebody help me, because I don't do well with that. Obviously, just approaching someone was difficult in the beginning. Yeah. So those first couple sessions, I think, were very important for me to record and tell you what was going on, and to kind of break down what was going on, simplify the things that were going on in my head and put them down on paper, and discuss what was actually going on with me. Just me, not what was going on in a blog that I read that said I was supposed to do. Yeah. So I think that initial beginning part of when we started working together was very important to kind of lay the foundation for what the next however many weeks were going to be.
Yeah, sure. And I think for you, a lot of it was starting the place of just setting little challenges or little tasks or little things that I wanted you to change, as opposed to like trying to change everything all at once, and just getting you okay with being a little uncomfortable in situations that you could then like deal with.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of just recording, how I was feeling, what the kind of emotional patterns were that were coming up, and all the things that were going on, and the language that I was saying to myself, and kind of becoming aware of all that stuff that I was saying to myself, and, the things that were true and the things that weren't true, and, figuring out how to step out of that hole that I was kind of in, and figure out, like you said, getting uncomfortable. You've given me little exercises to do, to take me out of my rigid schedule and comfort zone, and look at it more as an exercise. Let's try this out and see where it goes, rather than saying, you need to do this, this is going to fix it. It was kind of more of a push and pull to figure out what was going to work and what was actually going to take me slowly down the next steps.
Yeah, definitely. And so if you were to think about the things that had the most impact when we were working together, what are some of the things that come to mind?
One of the exercises where specifically we had, there was kind of two. There was exercises more around food and exercises more around the working out, because they both have been such an issue for me. One of the biggest things was we decided that I wasn't going to do my normal workouts for, I think we had 2-3 weeks, maybe it was a month at a time, just to take off from all of it, just to realize how much time that freed up and what other things that I could fill that with. It was kind of that replacing things that I was already doing with new other things that could give me a similar satisfaction without being detrimental or rigid. And then in terms of food, just taking those days and going into a restaurant and ordering something, or having somebody else order for me, or the best thing off the menu, and just not thinking about it was huge. And it also helped me to realize how uncomfortable that made me. And I didn't realize just how uncomfortable it would be for me to do. I mean, it was like someone walking up to a cliff about to jump off and staring over the edge for me to stare at a plate of food that I wasn't comfortable with. And it really kind of kicked it up for me to realize how this really is a really big problem, and I need to tackle this. And it also helped me to realize that it's a whole lot scarier to talk about it and to stare at the plate than it was to actually put the food in my mouth.
Yeah. Which was something I said to you so many times after the situation. I was like, the anticipation is going to kill you, but I bet we're going to chat after this and you're going to be like, it was fine. And that happened every time.
Yeah. And, and you didn't make me feel, and one of the other things that I thought was really important was you didn't make me feel shameful. I mean, it's like someone who's going skydiving and they're about to skydive and the guy's like, just do it, just go. Whereas you were like, why don't you just give it a try? It was just more of a relaxed, let's just try this out and see how it goes. And you were very, understanding of the fact that it was really scary for me. Rather than pushing me, you kind of gently gave me the nudge, which is what I needed, because force never works with me. And, tough love has never worked with me. And so I think that's another reason why it was that gentle push and pull, slowly, working at the pace that worked for me was good.
And so where are you now in terms of body image and relationship with food, and how has that progressed? And don't feel the need to be saying everything's perfect. I want you to be really honest about what is fixed and what are you still working on.
Sure. One of the biggest things for me too, when I first came to you with all the stomach problems and all of that, because I had a stomach ulcer at one time and had just tons of issues around that. And I was taking Prilosec and Nexium and all kinds of antacids. And I've been able to get off the Prilosec, which is a huge thing for me. I'd literally been taking a Prilosec either once or twice a day for almost 10 years, over 10 years actually. And just being able to get off of that was a huge thing for me. And I'm just realizing eating more to support my body versus eating what I'm supposed to eat has changed my life immensely. I mean, I just feel when I walk into a room, I don't have the same dialogue that I used to have with myself. I used to say things like, what are they going to eat? What can I pack? What do I have in my car that's going to be a safe food for me to grab in case? And that would just create more stress around it. Whereas now I can just know if I'm going somewhere, if they have hamburgers and they have chicken and I really want a hamburger, then I'll have one. But if I'm actually really not feeling like a hamburger, then I can have the chicken or whatever the case is or whatever it is there. And if it is only hamburgers and I don't really want a hamburger, I can eat it anyway because it's not going to be the end of the world. It's just going to be food. And I a lot of the binges that I used to have too, after losing a lot of the weight and eating binges was a huge thing for me too. And that alone, eliminating that as a regular practice has been amazing because I don't feel as scared around food. But there are a lot of situations that I still have those feelings that come up and I'm able to tackle them in a different way than I used to be. And just fill my time with more happy things than I used to. I didn't realize how many hours I was spending on nutrition blogs and workout websites and thinking about how I would plan my day around that. I now plan my day around other things that light me up, like painting. I used to paint my whole life and then I got away from it because I just would feel so depleted by the end of the day from working out and work and cooking and reading blogs that the last thing I wanted to do was be creative. So almost by regenerating and filling the space with things like a creative thing like painting and things like that, it's allowing me to kind of fill the space with other things that I enjoy doing and like doing.
And I really want to highlight this. Like Jenna is a fantastic painter and artist, and it's really good to see that she now has the time to do that and the mental space to be in the right place to be able to do that. And that for me is one of the biggest things that I see as a benefit of people getting over this stuff, is it then frees them up to be able to do things that actually, as you say, like light up your life, to be like really benefiting you in so many ways.
And to that, it actually is interesting because when I used to focus so much on my body and about how I looked, I was always looking for that gratification. Like, oh, Jenna, you look so good. You look so fit. What are you doing? And people used to, and I think one of my most liked photos on Facebook, I deleted it, but it was when I was at one of my smallest and I was, had my arm out and I was like, oh, I look so good. I look so great. And people were just commenting. And now that I'm really putting my worth in other places like painting or work or relationships, I posted all these paintings and I have probably triple the amount of likes, give or take, likes for my paintings. And people are asking and talking to me so much more about my paintings than they ever were about my body. So why in the heck did I care, what my quote unquote perfect arms looked like at that time, because what was it really doing for me? I mean, truly, what was it doing for me? And that's what you helped me to realize was it was doing nothing but making me crazy and miserable.
And so if you're to compare where you are now versus where you were when you started, like what are the big changes that come to mind?
Yeah. In terms of physical changes, it's actually interesting because through the whole process, there was initial weight that I needed to gain in order to be normal. And I knew that going into it. I looked at myself and I knew I was too small, but it was also that give or take fight, because it was so scary to me and so, looming to think about putting on weight. And once I let that go, there was the initial weight gain, but there was also a leveling out. I mean, it took time and it was not pretty. There was a lot of crying. There was a lot of panics and a lot of, clothing being thrown around the room and thrown out and repacked and, bought. But through that process, once I let go of all of it and, let it happen naturally, my weight's really leveled out to, I'm literally probably the same size that I was when I was a senior in high school. And it's not, I'm kind of just my normal self. I just feel like myself again. And truly, that was the last time that I didn't care about anything.
Yeah.
Weight wise. And it's just interesting that it kind of just shifted, once I just whatever about it. I mean, yeah, things are different, but I don't have washboard perfect abs or anything like that. But I just feel good in my own skin and my own body. Then for so long, I didn't feel comfortable in my body or in my clothes or how I felt. And I would just constantly pick apart. And that's the biggest change for me, is just being able to put on clothes and not have to worry about what size it is or think about how tight it's going to feel or how I need to be able to pack this smaller size so that I can fit into it later and not eat as much or whatever. That is just so freeing to not really have to think about, if I eat this, it's not going to matter tomorrow or change my weight, because my weight's going to do what it wants to do and it doesn't have to, shift.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I did with you, and I do this with other clients as well, when there is that weight going on, focusing on all of the other things that are happening alongside that are then beneficial. So for you, it was like, yeah, you've put on weight, but you've now got your period back. Mm-hmm. And like starting to notice those other, like your digestion is now getting better, like you're sleeping better or whatever it may be. So you can start to see that this isn't something that is like really bad and that you need to be fighting it. It's like, this is part of the healing process and you need to go through this. There is no way around this.
Oh yeah. You have to go through the ugly part. I mean, I 100%, the whole time I kept thinking, what am I doing? What am I doing? This is awful. And it was almost just like a light went off and it's like, why am I the more I tried to fight it, the worse it got in, one way or another. And absolutely, aside from the weight, like you said, I mean, sleeping better, worrying less, having a better relationship with my husband, being able to do fun things and not get upset or worry about it. Did I do this workout? Did I do that? And just, all of the other physical things that have, felt better and helps with everything. And, I feel more present when I'm talking to people. I'm not thinking in the back of my head if I'm going to get a second workout in when I'm having a conversation with a friend and, that kind of a thing as well. I mean, it gets all tied together.
Definitely. And so the final thing I want to ask is, if there's someone who is thinking about like dealing with these situations, so they've got issues around body image, they've got issues around food, or they're suffering with other symptoms, whether it be like digestion or reproduction in your case, or whatever they've got going on, and they're like sitting on the fence, they don't know what they should be doing. Like, is there any advice that you would like to give that person? And again, like, you don't have to give me gushing praise and say work with Chris. I mean, like, just with working with anyone, what would be the advice would be from your perspective?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I was reading on your podcast recently was talking about, or I think it was something that you posted recently, today, kind of just looking at the difference between the story that you're creating in your head and what the actual reality is. Because that was a big, big nugget for me that I got from working with you. Probably one of the biggest things was the difference between what's actually going on and what's fact and what you are perceiving to have be going on. And also just kind of what your expectation is of certain situations, of the way that you think things are supposed to go and things are going to go and the way things have always went. Working with you, I took that and kind of broke it down to figure out what was actually really going on. And 99% of the time, what was going on was not a product of what was actually going on. It was a product of what I told myself was going on, or what I expected to happen or be going on at the time, if that makes sense. So I would say just really figure out what you're actually feeling. And working with someone like Chris, or working with you, Chris, has helped me. I wrote a lot of that stuff down, and journaling and kind of breaking that stuff down helped me, but actually revisiting those actual stories on a day-to-day basis for a long time was really what helped me to break down what was really going on in my head, by just kind of removing certain words or thinking about the have-tos or the shoulds or the is this enough, or what's going to happen, and what if, or what, all of those what ifs and that kind of thing, and just kind of saying, all right, let's figure out what's actually going on here. I think that's the biggest thing for anyone going through an eating disorder, because I don't think that it's like you always say, 99% of the time, it is not about the food. And I think one other thing you said to me was 99% of the things that people eat are not the things that they have to eat. And a lot of us convince ourselves, I have to eat this to feel this way, or I have to have this perfect thing to function. And really, no. If someone, it's just all made up.
Definitely. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on the show and for just sharing your story and being really honest about what you went through and how you've experienced this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome, Chris. Thank you so much for everything that you've done for me.
So that is it for the show. Thanks again for tuning in, as always. As I mentioned at the beginning, I am taking on new clients at the moment. If you want to find out more, then simply head over to www.seven-health.com/help, and you'll be able to find out more information, and you can apply for that free initial chat to see if we are a good fit for one another. Next week, I'll be back to the normal format. That will be with another guest. So until then, take care.
Thanks for listening to Real Health Radio. If you are interested in more details, you can find them at the 7 Health website. That's www.7-health.com.